Hello and welcome to blockchaingamer.biz, your source of the most relevant news in blockchain games. Check out all of our stories on blockchaingamer.biz and follow us on Twitter at BCGBiz. Today is Friday, the 28th of April, and I'm your host, Jenny Jordan, and with me as always is co-host John Jordan, and we'll be rounding up the news from the week. Hi, John.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Fine, yeah.
Good.
Let's crack on.
So, yes, that's right. There's a lot of mythical in this week's news. Starting off with the investment news of 20 million into mythical by Skytail Digital, which is a German Web3 tech VC. And included in that deal seems to have been the other sort of surprising news about mythical migrating to Polkadot. So, can you elaborate a bit on that news?
Can I? Yeah, I mean, obviously the two things are sort of, well, not obviously, but the two things seem, two parts or two sides of different sides of a coin. I've never heard of Skytail or Scytail, whatever they're called, before, but it seems like they don't officially say they're a Polkadot sort of affiliated VC, but they don't seem to have done much investment before. Doesn't seem to have done much into blockchain gaming.
I read somewhere it's like the 15th deal they have done.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
sure that is in Web3 or 15th
yeah.
in total.
But Gavin Wood, who's the sort of creator of Polkadot, is on their sort of board or partner or something like that. So clearly, the fact that they've put $20 million, which is a pretty large sum of money, certainly in the current market conditions. And I think their last fund was only $75 million, so they've put quite a big chunk of their fund. They put it into Mythical, and then simultaneously Mythical say we're sort of adopting Polkadot. Obviously, the two things are incredibly linked. I mean, whether in these sort of things, you sort of never really know whether Mythical Games would have chosen Polkadot on the basis of its excellent technical sort of background, or whether it needed sort of $20 million to say Polkadot's brilliant. I mean, somewhere between the two, I guess. But it's sort of so to go back a little bit on Mythical. So Mythical have been around for quite a long time. 2018, 2019, and they're US based in Seattle. They've been doing. They raised quite a lot of money. They raised hundreds of millions of dollars previously, and they're sort of building out a platform for other game developers to use. Although at the moment, only sort of games that they have sort of commissioned or developed themselves have used this sort of platform. And it sort of started out actually based on the EOS blockchain. So that was their sort of they didn't call it the Mythical chain. Now they call it the Mythical chain. And it started out based on EOS, and it had it was sort of quite centralized. So it wasn't a public blockchain in the sense that you couldn't see the data going through it, and you couldn't have the wallets were sort of baked into the software, so you couldn't have your own wallet. You sort of you had to go through sort of a custodial sort of system that they controlled. So it was kind of very Web 2.5, and over time they sort of decentralized it. So one of the big things that happened was their first game, Blanco's Block Party. All the assets were on this Mythical chain, and then they allowed you to move some of them to Ethereum, which is a bit of a complicated. Well, not complicated, but it's a bit of a process. But you could take those assets, those NFTs out, and they would go away from the Mythical chain, and they'd be on the Ethereum chain. So I mean, people did do that, but more of an experiment. There wasn't like stuff you couldn't then log into Mythical using your MetaMask and then access the game using those NFTs. So it's still quite custodial. And then they sort of announced that they're going more sort of opening up. And I guess the Polkadot part is the sort of the next stage for that Mythical sort of chain, which is still, I think, fairly centralized in the sense they sort of control it, but under the hood, they'll be running on their own chain. They'll be, running, probably still supporting bridging to stuff like, Ethereum and other EVM chains, and now Polkadot. And Polkadot, I'm not that technical, but Polkadot is basically Polkadot and Cosmos are seen as like these sort of more open blockchains where there's not like a centralized blockchain that everything sort of runs through. They're much more people can run their own chains. In Polkadot, they're called parachains. So basically, Mythical will run its own sort of parachain,
Mm-hmm.
and that will and that will, whether that will be the only sort of blockchain that they're running on, or whether that be part of other blockchains. It's sort of hard to know, but they're still quite a centralized sort of a company. So now, as well as Blankos is still running on the old the old blockchain, as far as I can see, the old EOS based blockchain, and they've got this new game coming out we'll talk about I think today called NFL Rivals. It's an American football game, and that's sort of the first one I think that's running on the new Mythical chain. And they've got this other one called Nitro Nation, which is a drag racing
Yeah.
mobile game. Those are both mobile games, and those sort of two new games are coming out on the sort of the latest generation of the Mythical chain, which I think is what they're going to be migrating or adding Polkadot support to. So the Blankos one is still sort of a bit legacy, and over time they'll move that one over as well. So those are the sort of games they're doing on that. I guess the interesting bit for me was Mythical also launched this thing called the Mythos Foundation. So this is a sort of like an entirely new blockchain, although very in the early stages very much controlled by Mythical, with actually sort of people like Animoca as well, and that's like a totally separate thing in terms of the blockchain. So they've got a token live on Ethereum at the moment, and they have this big sort of a DAO, so it's like a DAO project, and they've got all these advisors and all these sort of people on the committees and all this sort of stuff. But and Mythical has also announced that this Mythos thing, which currently at least the tokens are on Ethereum, is also moving to Polkadot, which is sort of fine. I mean, I don't really sort of problem with that. I mean, I'm more, I would prefer things to be on Ethereum. I think Ethereum is probably, it has proven itself in a way that there's not a lot of stuff running on Polkadot at the moment. It may be technically brilliant. People really like the technicality of it, but there's just not a lot of stuff running on it at the moment. So, but the weird thing about it, and I got a bit on my hobby horse about this in my Substack, was that sort of Mythical Games has sort of decided for this supposedly independent DAO that they're moving to Polkadot without there's not been any voting or anything, because they're still setting themselves up. So I thought that was a little bit odd. I just thought from the optics that this Mythos Foundation was supposed to be independent and, finding its own way to decentralization, and, and in a sense, if obviously if those guys decided they wanted to move to Polkadot, that's sort of fine. But for Mythical to decide for them before this Mythos this Mythos Foundation ever really got up and running, to me seemed rather odd. And as I say, technically, maybe we're going to see the next wave of games is all going to be on Polkadot, and Polkadot's the next hot thing in the next bull market. I mean, fine, great, I have no problem with that at all. But it's just sort of you can sort of you can make the correct decision, but you can sort of do it in the wrong way. I think so. Mm-hmm. A little bit about them. And I think overall this, obviously any company can decide to do what it's going to do, but it's a little bit odd, this sort of 20 million that's sort of come in as I guess as some sort of sweetener thing, and would they have done it if they hadn't had it? And that's the sort of thing I'm thinking. I mean, they very well may have done. So I'm not saying they've just done it for a mercenary reason, but it just all put together to my sort of mind, it all seems slightly not clear where the incentives align.
Mm-hmm. Right. In other news, we have seen the PC-based blockchain game platform Ultra Games go live globally, and they have got Web 2 games and Web 3 games, all of which have been going live in on the 25th, Wednesday this week or Tuesday. And then other games that was announced beforehand, but that aren't currently live, but will be available later as well. And with the launch, you got a free NFT, I think, if you downloaded the Ultra to PC.
Yep.
Do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, we sort of covered it in previous weeks. I mean, it was sort of like one of these things, a bit of a launch with a sort of whimper, not a bang, really. I mean, I've been testing it for the last couple of months as one of the beta testers, so I guess I've sort of nothing's changed from the beta test to it going live. I'm obviously going live now. It means people can download it. Anyone can download it and sort of create their account and start doing stuff. But nothing sort of really changed. One thing I wondered if they were going to sort of, with the launch of the for the global launch of the platform, I wondered if they were going to sort of have some big game announcements, like it's day one and everyone download this game, because as you said, they've been quite active on socials, sort of talking about all the games that are coming at some point. And I would, and some of those, I mean, a lot of those games I've never heard of, to be frank. But some of them are sort of games. I mean, I guess Undead Blocks is probably one of the sort of biggest ones. They've got a few shooters, a few sort of trading card games as well, which obviously we see a lot in the blockchain market. But the only thing really that changed this week was, as you said, you could, if you were on a beta tester, they sent you a code, and if you were downloading it for the first time, I guess they also sent you a code, I suppose, an email code, and then you could create one of these NFTs. I mean, they call them uniques. They don't call them NFTs for some reason. So you could create one of these uniques which said, I can't remember what it said, it's a picture of it like a spaceship. So it's just a sort of fun thing to do. But I don't really get the impression that millions of people have been. Well, I know millions of people have not downloaded the Ultra platform. So I think with those sort of things, it just does take a long time. I mean, back in the day, I can remember the days before Steam, which is the big PC game platform. And I remember I was in the room when it was announced, actually, at the GDC conference, so years ago. And even for Steam, which is created by Valve, one of the biggest games companies in the world, most powerful, whatever. It took them a couple of years for the thing to sort of gain any speed, any momentum, really. And just those sort of network effects that you need for a platform like that. It just you can't. There's no shortcuts to that. You just have to be steadily and really well sort of running the platform and getting good games in there. So for Ultra, it will be we'll sort of get an idea, I suppose, in the next 6 months what's going on there. But with those distribution platforms, it really they need to. It's all about the content they can provide. It's all about getting good games. And although I will say at one point, so they do have this other thing, which is they have. So it's like Steam, where you can buy games and resell games on there. Then but they also have this thing called Ultra Arena, which isn't really live yet, which is their sort of esports platform. So in that, I imagine there'll be like a tournament system or competition. So games will be able to set up tournaments within there as an esports sort of hub. So that could be interesting to sort of speed up that network effect if people are, if like say, I'm totally making this up now, but if Undead Blocks were like, right, we're having, our first esports tournament's going live, and the winner's going to get $1 million of our token, or you can imagine that will get people in there in Ultra, not to download the game per se. They have to download the game once to play, but then they'll be doing that for other sort of things. So you can imagine a whole bunch of sort of games, sort of doing that, and not all games that want to be esports will be esports, but you can imagine a few doing quite well out of that. So we'll see for them in sort of 6 months' time, I suppose. But it's good to be finally live, at least.
It's kind of symptomatic in a way for how the blockchain games industry, and I mean, when games release, they are often not very ready, which we'll talk a bit more about later. They kind of launch a little bit, and then they launch a little bit more, and then there's just no big bang where it's sort of a massive launch date with it just doesn't seem to work like that anymore. And I don't think players really expect that either. So
and in fact, my criticism of Ultra is they've taken too long to get to this stage. They should have gone live earlier with less features, really. But what do I know? We'll see.
And then you have been talking to the guys from Far Away and the Mutant Cartel about the making of Serum City.
Yeah.
And that was an interview that is sitting on our website again.
I enjoyed that, actually. Yeah, so it's part of my podcast.
Yeah, it was a good interview.
Blockchain Gaming World podcast. So I actually did it last week. So there's sort of two components here. So there's the Mutant Cartel, which is a sort of collection of mutant ape holders, and they sort of have their own little community. Sounds demeaning, but they are actually the biggest community of mutants. I'm not sure how many there are, but they have like an online pledge, and they sort of have their own community, and they've created their own Mutant Hound NFT collection. So they're doing their sort of thing within the wider. They're sort of part of the Yuga Labs. They call it the Yugaverse. That's not an official term. They're not officially part of anything that Yuga's doing, but the way that you have with apes and bored apes and mutants, you can sort of, if you own one, you can do what you like with it. So they've been working on that for a year or so. I think bored apes have been around for been about a year and a half. mutants have been around. So they've been doing that. And then Faraway Games are, well established game developer. They've been making mobile games for years, and now they've got this Web3 thing, and they've got a game on Solana, which we won't go into. But so they're doing the game side of it. They're making the game, and Mutant Cartel are sort of providing the IP and the sort of narrative and all this sort of stuff. So it's a city building game. It's not going to be out until Q3 this year, so sort of September time probably. And that will be just available for Bored Ape and Mutant Ape holder, Bored Ape, Mutant Ape, and Mutant Hound, and there's one other NFT that the Mutant Cartel did. So that'll be like the sort of pre-season. And then, like a city building game, you sort of you start off with a broken down sort of city, and you're leveling up buildings, and you level up buildings that gives you more resources or different resources, and then you can create new buildings, and so that's the way they're doing it. But it's very much, it's not the point of the game isn't to be like a super cool game, although I'm sure they think it will be, but it's to sort of build up the sort of the narrative they already have in this Mutant Cartel, and that's I quite like it. But their thing is like the Bored Apes. The Bored Apes sort of are the sort of obviously the more expensive NFTs. But they're not very cool. So for the Mutant Cartel, mutants are really cool because they look cool. I mean, mutants, they just look. If you graphically looked at the Bored Apes and Mutant Apes, you go, mutants are much cooler, but they're nothing like as expensive. So there's this interesting sort of dichotomy they've got going in there, where the sort of mutants are looked down upon by the Bored Apes because the Bored Apes are sort of the more expensive ones, but the mutants are sort of the cool kids. And the mutants were created by people connecting this, putting a fixed sort of the Bored Apes drinking a serum. So that's why it's called Serum City, and created the mutants. So there's this interesting stuff going on there, and within Mutant Cartel, there's these two particular mutant apes called, I can't remember what they're called, Dark Fang and Black Soot, I think they're called. So they're two specific mutants NFTs, and they're sort of the main characters in there. So there's a whole narrative going on with what they've been up to, and that Mutant Cartel have done comic books based on those as well. So it's very sort of blockchainy in the sense that the game will be, I think, a good game, but it'd be gated by NFTs, and it will be sort of a slight insider joke to begin with, or an insider, so something to build up their own community, and then they'll slowly expand it out, I suppose, over time. So I just found it really interesting, and they were talking about interoperability and things like that, which is it's harder, much harder to do than the concept sort of suggests. But
no, but you got the impression that it really highlighted the opportunities and kind of limitless possibilities with Web3, and not shying back from talking about it, which we've seen some developers do, sort of try to hide, like we said, I guess last week as well. But it's just quite refreshing to sort of listen to two guys really knowing what they're doing, really got a clear idea and vision about where they're going and how to integrate Web3 in that.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, even, we all talk about community all the time in Web3, sort of rightly so, but it's sort of quite hard to judge it. But it's always interesting when, sometimes you talk to who you think are quite sort of well-known people in the blockchain game space, and you sort of tweet it out there, and sort of, as you know, on the socials, sort of nothing happens, no one retweets it, and it's sort of like tumbleweed, whereas these guys, they're not massive, they're not got millions of followers, but you tweet something out and they retweeted it, and some of their people were commenting on on the thread, and blah blah blah. So you just kind of felt at a very superficial level, there is a community with Mutant Apes, which is quite strong, and maybe from that sort of smaller group, maybe even stronger than the overall community for Mutant Apes, which is sort of quite 20,000 NFTs there, whereas the Mutant Apes is whatever, a few thousand, but they're really quite committed to the thing they're doing, which is one of the really powerful things of Web3 blockchain. So good luck to them.
Happening on Twitter. Right, and we did see the launch, as we've mentioned already, of NFL Rivals, which is by Mythical Games. And it's in partnership with American Football League, NFL, and it launched this week in early access. It's called
Off-season, isn't it?
Off-season, yes, that's right. So this is in its
because it's the off-season in the NFL, in the real world NFL. They don't start again until the 7th of September.
Yeah, so they're looking to sort of, this is the first couple of months, and then they're looking to move on probably around that time, aren't they? And I mean, I've played the game. The game is actually our game of the week as well. So there's been a lot of content about NFL and Mythical on our website this week. But yeah, it's enjoyable actually, the game, and I've never, played anything like this before. I mean, some sports game on console when I was a child, but American football games, it's the first one. And it really requires skills. And if you're starting completely from scratch, it's difficult to get the hang of even just the touchpad, because it's a mobile game, so it's all touch screen. The passing, the running, but it's skills, and you can get better. And I felt, even as a complete beginner, that I was getting better. And I think it was just enjoyable from that point of view. It didn't feel impossible to get the hang of things, and with sort of the improvement of getting it sort of smoother, higher speed, and so I think it can be a good game.
And I think from their point of view,
what are you going to say?
It's very much like a cut down American football. So I don't play those games either. But if you want to play like a Madden game, the whole point of Madden, something actually we discussed about the goals thing actually last week at the foot soccer game. But those sort of games have got very realistic, so they're hyper realistic. Obviously American football is 15 by 15. You have all these different very technical sort of roles in the team, and very technical playbooks where they play all the everything has to work like clockwork. And this is not that. This is not a simulation game. This is, I think, a 7x7. So it's a sort of a smaller group of players, and it's just sort of like the highlights. So you sort of very much focus on quarterbacks throwing balls and long balls, and very sort of simple controls. And then the main bit of it is like you're the manager of the team. So the main bit is sort of the team collection and buying cards. The cards are all licensed players in the NFL, which is what's called NFL Rivals. So that's the sort of it's combining that more management thing with some direct sort of gameplay. So that's the interesting bit. I mean, I guess going back to what you were sort of saying with the Mutant Cartel and Faraway, this is not a game that screams NFTs at you. if you didn't know, I mean, in the build that's just come out now through the App Store. So obviously the App Stores have rules about what you can do. And they limit what you can do. So at the moment, at least, and I guess it will stay like that for a while, is if you have a Mythical Game account already, you can link it to, you can log into that through the game app. And if you have NFTs in your sort of Mythical Market account, I assume they will bring those into the game. I've not actually tried yet. Should do that. But you can't. There's no way you can buy NFTs from the game. You can't even, as far as I can see, there's not even a a link out to go, if you want to buy these as NFTs, press here. None of that. And as far as I can tell, also the sort of Web 2 players in the game are exactly the same power, exactly the same as the NFT. So you don't get an advantage in the game having the NFTs. The only advantage is you can sell them on the marketplace. So it's sort of a very Web 2.5, Web 2.1, whatever you want to call it. But obviously they've taken that route because they want to get through the app stores. And I think that they seem to be suggesting they were like the number one sports game downloaded this week, maybe because there's not a lot of sports games out at the moment because the American season's off. But I think they've done okay in terms of downloads. I guess it's the question is how you sort of convert some of those people who don't know it's a blockchain game into some of the blockchain stuff. And that,
so again, Mythical, they've already got Blanco's Block Party out there, which is a very different game. It's a PC game, and does that feel much more Web3 to you, or
Blanco's? I mean, with Blancos again, they don't talk about NFTs really. But Blancos is just very different because it's a PC game. So with a PC you can do what you like. There's no one controlling what you do. So, but with Blancos, they're still there. All the Blancos characters are NFTs. So there's no sort of here's a Web 2 Blanco and here's a Web 3 Blanco. All the Blancos and all the accessories are NFTs. But you're not within the game itself. If you're doing stuff within the game, then you're using in-game currency and credit cards. So again, it's very, if someone didn't tell you were playing a blockchain game, you wouldn't know. And there's no in the game even with Blancos, there's no marketplace in the game. So to do the marketplace stuff, you have to go to there's a web interface to the marketplace.
Okay.
So you have there's two very separate things there. So I think that's Mythical's always been a bit like that. Mythical has always been let's not confuse people with technical stuff. Let's like focus on these cool experiences.
Yeah. Good word.
So that's always the route they've taken, and I don't personally. I mean, I'm not going to say that's wrong. I mean, personally, the games that excite me more are games that are have a bit more sort of Web3 in there or blockchain in there, because that's for me that's the interesting bit. But obviously, for a lot of people, they don't. A certain number of people don't like NFTs anyway. So if you say it's an NFT game, they're not going to get involved.
Yeah.
And I think, and a lot of other people are just confused by them. So they think NFTs are monkey pictures that once cost $1 million and now cost $10. I mean, so why would they get involved in that? Well, if you just say, well, this American football card, that's an NFT. Or NFT means you can go and sell it if you want to someone else. Then obviously that's the education experience. And again, I mean, that takes time. So we'll see.
Okay. So that's it from us, this weekly roundup today. And don't forget to go to our website, blockchaingamer.biz, and check out our Twitter. And we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.